The reason why we are talking about these two pedals, the Tube Screamer and the Noble's ODR1, is because Keeley combined those two circuits into one pedal. One pedal, two classic drives, voiced after some vintage specimens, and the option to use the tone control on one with the other. Did that make sense? You sort of have four pedals in one, and it's analog, by the way. And I've always thought that the Noble's ODR1 was more or less a Tube Screamer. I talked to some people, they said the same thing. I thought it was a Tube Screamer until I plugged in this pedal a couple of weeks ago. And yeah, it's not a Tube Screamer at all. The ODR did what I think a lot of people initially wanted from the Tube Screamer. Overdrive help when you can't push your amp into saturation. And the ODR1 is sort of one of the first pedals to do this right, in my opinion, and it's among the first places where you hear the term transparent and amp-like. Whilst the Tube Screamer is shaving off some low end and adding a mid hump, the ODR1 is more true to the EQ you already have between your guitar and your amp. So it's almost like working with a small amp before your amp, you know, like a amp in a box. And it's easy to see why this became a favorite among pro session players in the 90s. And you still see the 90s era Nobles on a lot of pro boards. If you want to get one of those 90s era Nobles, you will have to pay a lot. With this pedal, you get that and a Tube Screamer for $199 instead of buying a $1999 Nobles and a $1,500 Tube Screamer. Yeah, $199. And I'm kind of bashing the Tube Screamer a bit when I'm saying that the ODR did what the Tube Screamer couldn't do. The Tube Screamer shaves off a lot of low end and it's adding that telephone-like mid-hump in the tone. But I still think there's a good use of a regular TS overdrive sometimes, and especially in a mix, you don't need all of that low end. And the guitar is a very mid-driven instrument, so let's do more of that mid so we can all hear the guitar, which I guess is what a lot of us want. So there's a lot you can do between these two pedals and put together into one with the option to mix and match tone control with clipping options. You can do a lot. So let's demo the pedal. Then we'll go to a recording session where I use this pedal and hopefully we can see why these two green bastards are so popular among Tim Pierce, John Mayer, Stevie Ray Vaughan, etc. Okay, so let's start with the OD settings. The clipping is hard clipping on OD, and the tone control is a spectrum type of tone control. You are going from a flat EQ curve all the way to the left here, and as you are boosting or turning clockwise, you are boosting both bass and treble, which is kind of neat. And my clean tone is coming from a Milkman, the amp. Yeah, so to me that is basically like working with an amp. The response you are getting from the clipping and the tone control, the kind of unique tone control, is very amp-like. Okay, let's go over to the Tube Screamer settings. The clipping is soft clipping and the tone control is a low pass filter. Yes. Instantly sounds more compressed, and you can definitely hear that the bass is kind of rolled off. So let's do it like this. Sounds like a freaking great Tube Screamer, and you can definitely tell that there's less bass in the signal and more compression in the clipping. So let's bring the tone control from the OD side of the pedal and use the clipping from the TS side. Interesting, interesting. And by the way, this is my favorite combination that I've used the most after I got this pedal. Sounds amazing. Okay, let's switch it up. Tone control from the TS and clipping from the OD. That last setting, probably my least favorite combination on the pedal, but does that mean that a sound like that is useless? Definitely not, and I'm going to show you that by going into my DAW and show you how I use a pedal with a great, big, huge vocabulary like this when I'm recording guitars for a real song. So we are inside a session right here in Logic. I've made a rock and roll song to demonstrate this, to demonstrate the pedal and how I work when I record guitars. I would say there's one thing that I always do when I record, especially rock guitars. At some point in the song, there will definitely be one guitar panned left and one right. Sometimes the other one is doing something slightly different. I just want the two guitars to complement each other. But one important thing when I do that is that I often use pedals or tools like this to make sure that the gain structure is a bit different on the different guitars, and especially the EQ curve to be different. When the guitars are very similar, you get a more narrow guitar sound. And I like to have like wide, big guitar tones. Nothing wrong with the first thing. For example, Black Album by Metallica is more like dense and narrow because the guitar tones on both sides, or all the guitar tones I should say, are more similar. But I like to have a more different sound to make a wider mix. So I started out right here with a pedal and a Telecaster. I put the settings to OD and I had a nice crunch. You can hear a lot of the Telecaster in the tone. You can hear a lot of the amp, and you can hear some addition from the pedal, of course. And that sounds like this. It is panned halfway left because I want the mix to spread out even more in the chorus. So I'm starting like a bit narrow and I'm going like full wide on the chorus. But this is the first guitar, the Tele. And then we are still on the verse, by the way. I stopped playing the Tele and I went over to the right side guitar. I swapped out the Tele for a Gibson Explorer. I wanted to have humbuckers. That's one like element of getting a different tone and a different EQ curve. And I went over to the TS mode on the pedals. So the tone is more compressed, there's a bit more gain, I believe, and a different EQ. And that sounds like this. And then for like the last part of that verse, I'm playing both of the guitars again. So first you had the left one, and switching over to the right one, and then they come in together, and that sounds like this. Yes, and then we are moving over to the chorus. I'm still using the Telecaster for the left guitar. I turned up the gain on the pedal, and that's about it what I did for the left side guitar. Some gain and a lot of punch and a lot of definition still, which I really like. I first went for the same setup with the Gibson Explorer on the right side for the chorus. I found that using the same amp, because I was using the Milkman for both the guitar tracks on the verse, I wanted to have a more different and heavier guitar sound for the right side guitar. So I ended up using a silver tone instead of the Milkman for the right side guitar on the chorus. Then on the pedal, I went to that setting I talked about in the demo that I didn't necessarily like alone. But in the context right here of everything, you never know what guitar sound works in the context until you have like tweaked and tried a lot of things. All of a sudden it's an amp or a setting on a pedal that you're not a fan of alone, but it works really well together with the other guitars. So that's what I ended up using together with the silver tone. And it sounds like this. together. And then we are going back to the verse, and I played a guitar solo. This is my favorite combination that I talked about in the demo, of using the tone stack or the tone setting from the OD and the Tube Screamer clipping. Yeah. And for this part, I used my Donable guitar with the single coil setting. So it's kind of similar to the Telly actually. And that sounds like this. Simple solo right there, but it works. And that is how I use a pedal like this to make pretty decent, pretty good actually, I would say, guitar tones. And they sound big and widespread. You have to have two different guitar tones that complement each other. And sometimes you end up using a guitar tone that is not working necessarily that good alone, but together with the rest, it works perfectly. And that is what I really like with having a overdrive pedal with a very good EQ section. And you have some different clipping options. You can combine things. You have a pedal with a big vocabulary. And I think that's why you see these pedals often combined or by themselves on big session boards with really like pro guitar players. And especially I really like with the OD setting here that it sounds very amp-like and transparent, like two big buzzwords in a row there, but I mean it, yeah.